All right, why don't we go ahead and get started? Just verify that someone can hear my voice.
Yep.
Yes.
Great, thanks. Speaking into the great void. Yeah, like I said, it looks like we have a pretty thin agenda, but please do add to it if you have anything. Good, thanks. I'll pick up with the first one with Eric, and as folks are adding other items. Any update, Eric, on either the GitHub Actions or the Amazon instances?
No, still ongoing. The Volta release stretched out for most of last week. So yeah, right now I have like 3 different versions of Helm chart releases that I'm trying to just shuffle together into a single action that'll work for everything. Or possibly 2 actions, depending on whether or not there's a version file, but I think I can get around that with an if.
Okay. On the AMI instances, I know you plan to generate these automatically so that it's reproducible. Can you just say a word about what is involved in that?
It'll just be some Puppet scripting.
Okay.
Yeah. Not sure. Like if there's any particular details you'd like to know about, I can let you know. Um, but we have some pretty standard Puppet stuff that we use to generate builders, and then I can pretty much just customize it with whatever we need.
Could we, I'm sorry, does it make sense to create a repo with the specs in it so that the community owns it, so to speak?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. This is if I, write some code for that, I'm not going to keep it locally. I'll definitely uh put it somewhere appropriate.
Good, thanks.
Hmm.
Um, okay, SD core. Anything else on infrastructure? Anybody? Okay, SD core.
Yeah, so web console changes by Canonical. So my team has been super busy on web console, mostly on the API and making sure that some of the things that we added were uh, storing UPF and GNodeBs in the database through web console. So it's not something that's used by anyone right now except our NMS. So that's the UI that we built on top of SD Core. So this should not impact anything outside of what we're working on, but we're basically uh, making the API a bit more robust there. We've added some things with support for transactions and things like that. So on our side, we're using the web console to add UPFs, and once the UPF is in web console, we're able to add it to network slices and device groups. And when we delete a UPF in the API, it will automatically remove them from existing network slices device groups. So we're really on that front. Eventually, it's probably something we'll want to discuss and revisit how the configuration is sent to different network functions. So all the gRPC stuff, but right now we're not touching any of that. So that should have no larger impact than this. But yeah, we've been busy on that.
okay, thanks. So just let's see, Gabriel, are you there or? I don't see anyone from the AJ or Gabriel. I was just curious if they have followed any of this, and
They don't seem
if
to be
it's
online.
potentially useful for rock control usage. I'm guessing that's not been in your scope, canonical.
No, it's not. It's not been. I know that Gabriel has looked at some of the PRs and has made some reviews there. I don't think he's seen all of them, but he's aware of some of those things. But definitely, if it's something that the rock could benefit from, I'd be happy to have a discussion with Gabriel and AJ to see if we can align there, because definitely that would be useful. That could be useful for
Yeah,
other.
it could be. So yeah, well, just documenting what you've done will be a nice step on that towards that at some point.
Yeah, and the API changes come with the document changes that can generate the Swagger. So
Oh,
so
good, good.
all those changes are in there.
Got it. Okay. Anything else in the core? And again, I see we're kind of shorthanded on the core folks today, other than what we just heard. All right, let's move to SD-RAN. Okay, draft evaluation report. Sorry, who added that? Oh, that's Timon.
Hey, sorry. I was on mute. So, so just as a reminder, the Aether project and the Linux Foundation together commissioned a report kind of evaluating near real-time RIC open source solutions that are in the industry from a small company called Remedo that has some expertise. And their draft report is there's a link to it. I just posted there. This is mainly informational, I guess, at this point, although there's kind of a question about, any takeaways in there that we want to consider and, if there's anything actionable. I guess the holy grail here would be in some ways to kind of bring some projects together or create some greater critical mass in some ways or something like that. I don't know if that's how practical that is, but I think the report, I haven't read it in detail. I just got a copy recently. But yeah, I see your note here. So planning to, and when we have a broader audience, and I think we need Wu Jun and some others maybe. So enough said. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. Thanks. Yeah, we do have Wushang.
Yeah, I am here. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
Simon, I just checked the mail and I read briefly, very briefly read the report, and it seems like that report is quite similar to what I read before last year. So I will deeply review again, and then we'll I will give you some comments on it. But seems like everything. It seems like everything is covered. Yeah, I think it looks good for me. But I will review it again with engineering team, and let's see.
All right. So, the questions are really what to do with this now, and there might be is is there anything actionable?
Actionable things. So at least that report has several drawbacks that we have to I believe we have to address sometime soon. So that will be I would like to cover some of those in the next release so that we are in a good shape. But I will at least before doing that, I think I need to carefully review that document first. So if there is something critical, I will prioritize it and well try to commit it to the next release. But otherwise, I will review it with the engineering team carefully and then make a plan for it.
Yeah, that would be great. Just kind of an assessment,
Yeah.
I mean, number one, if there's anything you disagree with, I know you saw an earlier draft, but if there's anything you disagree with, we should raise it now before it becomes kind of the
Yeah.
final,
Yeah, sounds
right?
yeah.
Yeah, and that's not just all on Wushang. We should all take a look at it and
Yeah.
be prepared to talk about a little bit next week, hopefully,
Sounds good. Yeah.
or soon anyway.
Mhm.
All right, time and go. Thank you for filling out your notes there. Anything else on SD-RAN?
Yeah, a little bit more for regarding the release 1.5. So me and engineering team reviewed the blog post that Dennis shared with us. So it looks good. So I will ask her to post it sometime this week or early next week. Currently, I'm changing a little bit on the SD-RAN documentations website to correct some of uh, uh, wrong information there. So I'm fixing it, but it's not that much critical. So sometime soon we will post it. And about the webinar things, I talked briefly with Denise, and I think the late February is the good time. So engineering team starts writing some storyline for it. Probably there should be some demos and some like either ONAMP is in scope, and new RC service model X applications are also in scope, something like that. So we are designing the storyline. So once it's fixed, then we will start recording for the demo, uh, and then well, we can do that sometime. I mean, late February. Yeah.
Okay, good.
And yeah.
Yeah, anything. So I'm piecing together just a note here. I'll just call it working on
Webinar, yeah.
webinar and then to include it in a demo. If I
Correct.
heard right.
Correct.
Yeah, good.
Yeah, and other than that, we are still planning 1.6 release. So there are a couple of big work items, and also engineering team wants to implement a new X application. They would like to, sorry, they would like to propose the new use case within SD-RAN project. So they briefly provided me basic idea, but there are a couple of technical issues there to be resolved. So I'm discussing it with engineering team, and if the idea itself, I mean the algorithm and all architecture looks good, yeah, we would like to commit it to the next release. If not, then I will postpone it to the next release. I mean 1.7. But if we get a good idea and a good architectural view, then
Good. How are you doing?
we'll do it.
Hey, Gabriel, now you're muted. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, sorry, Larry. I unmute myself. Because I wanted to kind of get. I just recently joined the meeting. I wanted to have a little bit better understanding of the comments that were on the SD core side.
Yeah, we'll go back.
regarding-
We'll go back to that in a minute.
Okay.
Okay, Ujan, is there anything else?
I think that's all. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks. Okay. So let's go back to the core in just a second. Let me do on-ramp next because there is a core related issue there. And just FYI, Jenkins is now more stable than it has been. See all the green? That's actually highly unusual. Some of these will fail occasionally, but as you can see, this one's passing. This is one of the more complicated configurations with multiple GNB SIMs that passes most of the time. The one problem which is called out in the notes is UPF, which is failing consistently for basically this month. And I've also tried doing it off Jenkins, or not I have, but Bala has, and we are suspicious that perhaps something happened in the upgrade from 2.00 to 2.10 on the SD core charts. That's roughly the time frame in which it stopped working. And this particular run, there are different reasons it will fail, but this is the one that's kind of indicative of what we think is the core problem. Effectively, one of the UPFs the default UPF works just fine. The second UPF, there seems to be some failure in the AMF, SMF, in the control code, not in the UPF. That if you walk through the traces, you might see something. I'm not able to see what it is, but just raising that issue. Going back to the core, so Gabriel, Canonical is working on some API extensions to support their management plane. And I guess you're aware, but that was basically all that happened there.
Right. Yeah. So I have looked into the different PRs that the Canonical team has opened for the web UI. Based on the work that I'm doing for the release upgrade, I noticed that the previous ONF team also did some kind of like a API specification for the web UI, such that in this case, any front end can actually talk to the web UI to kind of configure different parameters, and the web UI passes that information toward to the different NFs. My question in here is that any of these changes requires any update on the config on the Open API file, or is just from the code perspective what is kind of mentioned here about the APIs?
Regarding the Open API, what we're doing right now with UPF and GNodeBees, I think we're the only one using those. They're done with the documentation changes in line to be able to generate new Swagger files, Open API files. So that should be good. But if you want to look at this, I would be happy to have a chat with you to look more into this.
Oh yeah. No. My question is more like whether any of these changes require any change. So there is in the web console, there is a directory called config API. That config API has an Open API specification that was created by the ONF team, and there is of course code related to the Open API for the API that is actually being used on the web UI. One of the things that I noticed in there is that, for example, for the slicing side, the SSD and the SD are assumed to be optional, which is not the case, right? So SSD is always required, while the SD is optional. But that Open API file doesn't have any indication of that. So what I was curious to see is whether you guys need to make any change on the Open API file itself, or the API needs to kind of be recreated again, or is just kind of like more like code perspective that is being updated. Because so far I have seen just code being updated, but not the API itself.
Okay, yeah. So config 5G, I think is the project that is used between web console and the different network functions, right? To exchange the data of the configuration to the different network functions.
Based on what I don't know, I didn't see Ajay here in the meeting, but I asked him about the question about the KissConfig API. And my understanding was that this API was kind of a file created for the ROC to talk to the web console. So if that file is used from the ROC to talk to the web console, it's going to be any change on that is going to affect also as well the work that you guys are doing, which is this NMS front end that you guys have towards the web console. So that's what I was kind of curious when you talk about legacy API, whether there is something related to that.
I do not think so, but I've taken a note to look a bit more into this. So I'll have more answers next week.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Perfect. We can discuss that later. Thanks.
Gabriel, something about that rings a bell for me. There might have been the Open API spec might have been created by reverse engineering what was in the config manager or web config API, so that it would generate code automatically for the ROC adapter. So it might be that it was edited by hand or something like that and not fully created, automatically out of it.
Okay. Yeah, because again, there are a few things that can be improved on that side, but one of the first warnings that I just say, don't make any change because that's going to affect whoever is working on any front end. It's going to affect them. So it's not like a unilateral change that I can make in there. And that's what since I know that the canonical team are very active on making improvements on the web UI, that's what I was, trying to check whether they were planning to make any changes on the config API or what was the plan? Because so far I have seen, several PRs coming from the canonical team, but most of them have been improvements from the code perspective and some other issues, but nothing to the API itself. And as since when I joined the meeting, I saw the note saying about the legacy API, and that's what I was kind of curious. What the legacy meant in this specific case, whether it's changing the API itself or what.
Yeah, by that I meant the API that would be used by SIMAP or something like that. So
exactly, yeah, and that's my understanding that the config API is the one that actually allows to communicate either the CMAP, the ROC, or in this case the canonical NMS to the web UI. So that's what I was kind of curious about, whether there is any change on the config API that may be required.
Okay.
Right, we can discuss later next week.
Yeah, I'd like to revisit this next week. So just as a TST, we have a sense of what the issues are here.
Yeah, no issues at the moment, but there may be a few improvements. But I want to again, this is not a unilateral thing that can be done, and whoever has any front end to the web UI is going to be affected because of these changes. If, let's say in that case, the ROC or the network management system that the canonical team has is going to be affected by that.
Got it.
Mm-hmm. Thanks.
Okay, nothing else. Let's move back onto the agenda with the ARA updates.
So the CTE, I'm working on the SD side. So right now, I get the draft version of the SD run error blueprint ready. I need to talk to my professor to ask him to review it first, and then maybe I can share with you guys to have another section of review.
Great.
In the meantime, I'm trying to work with my teammates, who our software side to make sure the Kubernetes is supported on our portal. So in the future, we can bring the SD run available for our users.
How are you? So it's not the case that Kubernetes is supported on your portal now, is that correct?
Yeah, right now we mainly rely on containers. Yeah,
individual containers.
Yeah, so this is what right now what we are trying to do is what we call a bare metal mode. So Kubernetes and other things can be used. Yeah, otherwise right now we can only use the existing Docker containers. Yeah.
Got it. So just I'm sure you're looking at the way that OnRamp sets up Kubernetes. It's not specific to OnRamp. Aether has been tested extensively on RKE2, so different flavors of Kubernetes are not all equal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'll just take note of. Okay. Yeah, anxious to see the draft blueprint when you have it. SD core looks like there's also a blueprint for nearing review.
Joshua, do you mind give an update?
Yeah. So on the SD core side, last week I added some update to the blueprint, specifically how the sim programming is done in detail. So right now, the team here is reviewing the whole blueprint, and it's almost ready. So we'll let you know when it's ready.
Okay, great. Anxious to see both of those.
Yeah. So I have a question, Larry. Does Aether have like any plans on supporting? I mean, I know currently it's like, let's say for SD core, there's the Kubernetes deployment. So is there any plan on supporting, let's say, something like deployment using Docker Compose as the main orchestrating platform? Like,
There's no plans. I mean, it certainly would be an alternative way of managing. If someone brought it forward as an option, it's certainly not out of the question at all. I don't know of any plans to use Docker Compose.
right, okay.
I mean, it is the case that while the core comes up on Kubernetes, there are auxiliary pieces. For example, how one deploys a Gnode B in a container, or how one deploys a simulator in a container. And those containers are now individual containers, and we have playbooks to bring up containers in various ways. Replacing all of that machinery with Docker Compose, if that made any sense, is certainly a possibility for OAI, for UE RANSIM, for GNB SIM. Those are all containers outside of the Kubernetes space.
Right.
So I don't know where you were, if you were thinking of it in terms of that or in terms of the core. The core obviously is now a set of Helm charts.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking about it from the core perspective, but yeah, I mean, it makes sense. It's not something not doable. So yeah.
All right. Anything else, or any other topics anyone else wants to raise?
Well, there was this article on security flaws on SD core that was added after we discussed SD core.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for reminding me of that. So I don't know who added that bullet.
Yeah, that was me, Timon. Just to I just happened to catch this article that kind of went out. It looks like there was a group just kind of identifying security flaws, and I guess we've seen this kind of behavior before. It's often kind of a research project or a student project, just doing security scans of different open source, and then they try to report and kind of expect there to be somebody to be responsive and to go fix whatever they found and whatnot to, I just wanted to, let this group know about it. And I'm curious if anybody here was aware of the outreach, because they specifically called out SD Core as a group that just wasn't responsive when they reached out. And that's probably the most negative piece of it, is just, having a community that's not responsive, even if it can't fix the problems. So I'll pause here. Anybody aware of the outreach coming in from this group?
I don't recognize this, but there have been, so where are these folks from?
I have not heard of it before, and they specifically mentioned the AMF at some point in I think it's in the PDF, or they link to a PDF anyway, and in that PDF towards the end on page 18, there's a list of CVEs for SD Core LTE. Well, they mentioned LTE there, so I'm not sure if we're aware. There's at least a list of CVE that they list in there. And
Yeah.
even in the PDF, there's a specific example out of the SD Core code.
So I've got my cursor on ransacked PDF. Is that it?
That is it.
Yeah,
It looks like it's all out of Gainesville, Florida. And one person from North Carolina.
Yeah, I saw the, okay. Yeah, so we should take a look at this. Let me link this as well. All right, so I'm going to get both these two reports on next week's agenda and give everyone a chance to take a look at them, and then we can discuss and figure out what to do next. Yeah, I have, it's been a long time, like well over a year since I heard from somebody on a topic like this, but I'd have to go dig through email to see if it's related. I don't recall.
Yeah, that's my memory as well. All right, I just wanted to bring it to everybody's attention.
Yeah, I mean, what I recall from before was basically, I shouldn't even speculate because I don't know that it was the same one, but it was not specific to, vulnerabilities inside of AMF or anything like that. It had to do with gRPC and sort of more generic communication issues. But again, this may be a different situation. All right, let's revisit both of these two topics, the RIC review and the security issues on next week's call. Is there anything else? All right, thanks, everybody.
Thanks, bye.
Thank you. Bye.